Hello, everyone. Welcome to CXO Spice Talk. Today's topic is Empathetic AI. Our special guest today is Kevin Levitt, Global Business Development Lead, Financial Services at NVIDIA. Hello, Kevin. Welcome to CXO Spice Talk.
Hi, Helen. Thanks for having me.
So before we dive into our chat today, Kevin, tell us about your background and what led you to financial services and NVIDIA.
Sure. Excited to share a little bit of my history. I actually have spent really the past 15 plus years at the intersection of data, technology, and financial services. Most of that tenure has been actually with startups. Starting in Northern Virginia with a company called ComScore, then moved out to the Bay Area to join Credit Karma. And along the way, always working at companies that are about 200 or so folks, seeing them scale to 1,000, really fortunate to be a part of those experiences. And along that journey, always had an opportunity to work with some of the biggest banks in the world, and was always curious to learn and understand their cultures and how they operate at scale. And that's one of the things that drew me to NVIDIA, was knowing how they hold a leadership position as one of the greatest companies in the world in terms of people, culture, technology. One of the main factors that drew me in was seeing how a company the likes of NVIDIA actually operates at scale and does it from a point of innovation, namely in artificial intelligence. So the confluence of events that opened this door for me to join NVIDIA in an industry that I love, financial services, being at the forefront of this great wave of innovation for artificial intelligence, and to really communicate with the entire ecosystem globally about the opportunities that it affords companies from capital markets to consumer finance when it comes to AI. Just was super exciting and impossible to pass up.
Wow, I can't think of anyone better to talk about empathetic AI, Kevin. Delighted to have you here. So according to IDC, AI technology spending will grow to $97.9 billion in 2023. So it's more than 2.5 times the spending level of 2019. Where do you see the biggest growth, area when it comes to financial services?
Sure. I think there are three important highlights here that I'd love to touch on. One is the expanding number of use cases for AI and ML in financial services. So I'd say, just over a year ago, some of our biggest customers, the largest banks in the world, were talking to us about having maybe 200 or 300 different applications and use cases for AI and ML underway across their enterprise. Now that number is over 500. And to me, this is one of the most exciting aspects of artificial intelligence and its application in financial services, is that there is no single silver bullet use case. This is not automotive where we're just trying to make a car drive itself. And certainly that will be one of the greatest innovations of our lifetimes. But for financial services, there are ultimately thousands of applications that are going to be AI enabled, and how different enterprises, because they're in insurance or they focus on capital markets and investment banking, choose to invest and prioritize different use cases, and then leverage the technologies that NVIDIA brings to bear against those opportunities, is super exciting. And we expect that growth to continue in terms of use cases. Number two is the speed at which AI within financial services is migrating out of the realm of research and development and into production. And we see a constant drumbeat of interest from leadership across financial services asking us how to accelerate their AI strategy by enabling their teams to move more quickly into production with AI-enabled applications. And those two initial aspects of the growth, both the expanding use cases and moving into production, are driving the third element, which is AI centers of excellence. We're continuing to see that this is a preferred path forward for leading companies across insurance, asset management, payments, retail banking, and so forth to really operationalize what is a core competency and strategic effort across the ecosystem, which is to invest and deliver AI-enabled applications through a center of excellence that has the access to the data, has the access to the talent, has the access to the lines of business and their priorities, and ultimately has access to the infrastructure, the accelerated computing capabilities at a data center scale to bring these applications enabled by an AI and supporting algorithms into production.
Wow, it's such a great recap of what's happening today, right? Thank you. Speaking of AI or conversational AI, I actually started working with banks implementing conversational AI in their innovation labs 5 years ago, right? I remember there were times we had to wait for a day for the training data to be processed and return any meaningful insights. So has AI become more pervasive in production today? What are the typical challenges adopting conversational AI?
Sure, it absolutely has become more pervasive. I think we just touched on some of the drivers behind that. I like that, we're going to be talking about conversational AI today. I think it's an application that many of us can relate to because we've both been surprised as well as frustrated by a virtual assistant or chatbot that's leveraging conversational AI capabilities. And one of the reasons that we're seeing these solutions in production more readily is that the accelerated computing power of platforms like NVIDIA's really address that main problem you highlighted at the beginning, which is historically to implement and deliver accurate models, the training for these models would take not just days, as you mentioned, but weeks or even months. And when you're talking about conversational AI, you're really talking about an ensemble of many different AI and ML models that come to life through ultimately a virtual assistant or chatbot as an example. And many of the foundational models are large language models. And the sophistication of these models has grown as the size of the models has increased dramatically, almost exponentially over the past couple of years, to the point now where the largest language models are 500 billion parameters strong. And so in order to train on data that's relevant to your business and enhance these models so that they reflect the needs of your customers and optimize them for your situation, you need an accelerated computing platform to not only train the model so that you can iterate and improve it quickly, but you also need accelerated computing platforms at the point of production or inference, because the last thing you want to do is invest and train this amazing model that can answer all these important questions for your customers, deploy it into production, and then have your customers waiting seconds for a response. It needs to be a natural conversation as we're having here, which means that at the point of inference, it needs to execute in milliseconds. And that's where, again, NVIDIA's platform is really operationally sophisticated to address not just the hardware needs, but it's also all the way through the full stack computing platform up to the application layer, so that at the point of inference, it's a natural experience. And these improvements in the underlying technology, both the models as well as the accelerated computing, acceleration from a computing standpoint, are really what's driving the increased pervasiveness, going to your original question, of AI across financial services when it comes to them being in production.
Yeah, I have certainly seen the improvement interacting with the chatbots, especially with some of the major banks these days. Having really worked in the financial service vertical my entire career, I realized that hyper-personalization, data security, customer service, and pricing are more important in this vertical, especially when it comes to creation and delivery of financial products. So what role has AI played in enabling the innovation in financial services?
Sure, I think you did a great job of highlighting what I was sharing earlier, which is that the application of AI in financial services is not limited to, a top 2 or 3 use cases or set of use cases. It's really pervasive across the entire experience. And the way that I think about it is from the perspective of a consumer who is in market for a new financial services product, whether it be a home loan or an auto loan. If you think about that journey and that life cycle of the customer, they're experiencing AI ideally at every point within that cycle if the financial services company is truly optimized from an AI enablement standpoint. And so, it starts with marketing, right? Which is how are you reaching and engaging consumers with your products and your offerings? How are you personalizing the experience when they come to your website or your mobile app using artificial intelligence and really leveraging recommendation systems based on all the data that you have available, either to that existing customer or for that prospect, to tailor the recommendation and the product that you're offering them based on their life stage need. Once that consumer is interested in the product and they click on it, they're likely taken to an application. They're going to submit the application. And again, that's where AI comes to bear, which is at the point of underwriting, because financial services in many cases is all about risk management and how do you price risk appropriately and acquire profitable customers. And so utilizing deep learning at the point of underwriting, incorporating alternative data is a key point of differentiation and opportunity for AI. Also, at that point of acquisition, there are a number of fraud checks that are being done, whether it's fraud detection from a transaction standpoint, or in the case of an application, more likely for know your customer, anti-money laundering requirements, and using AI at the point of your fraud detection and identification processes is another way to differentiate and improve the performance of your fraud detection solutions, reducing false positives, increasing their accuracy to improve the customer experience. Then from a document management standpoint, particularly if we're talking about more sophisticated products like an auto loan or a home loan, so many data elements associated with submitting tax returns and pictures of identification and utilizing robotic process automation and AI to extract the relevant data from all that documentation that's submitted to do it accurately, as well as then ultimately to service the customer when they have questions or needs along either the acquisition journey or post-acquisition as they're utilizing that product and have questions, using virtual assistants, chatbots, conversational AI in the call center to assist the call center agent. So as you can see, AI is really pervasive through the entire life cycle, and that I think is what is really enabling all sorts of innovation across financial services today.
Yeah, see, if I hear you right, pretty much AI is embedded in our day-to-day life. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and explainable AI is really critical, right, to financial service companies. For example, regulations actually dictate that consumer must be informed of why their credit card application was rejected. How does explainability impact AI in the context of banking and financial services?
Yeah, it's critical. As you said, customers deserve explanations. They are required to receive, in industry parlance, an adverse action notice when they're declined for an application for a particular product. And AI can really help banks go beyond just the regulatory required adverse action notices to actually share ideas about what is it about the consumer's profile that they can potentially work on from a financial health standpoint. How do they improve their credit score? How do they improve, what are opportunities to perhaps improve income, et cetera? And so explainability is key because we need to be able, as users of artificial intelligence, to explain to internal constituents as well as external constituents why the algorithms are making the decisions that they're making. And this is an area of significant investment for NVIDIA, and we have solutions oriented towards that, as well as ecosystem partners that provide explainability solutions to the market. But this use case goes beyond kind of communication from the business to the consumer. There's some great data in the marketplace that talks about how financial advisors were more likely to use the recommendations that are coming to them from their company's AI if it came with an explanation as to why the algorithm was suggesting particular investment instruments and particular equities. So if you think about the confidence that comes to perhaps the wealth management team when they actually have an explanation associated with the recommendation, so that they can more accurately give that financial advice to the customer, whether that's a consumer or an institution. There's so many roles and opportunities for explainability, which is just one component of an overall trustworthy AI experience within banking.
Wow, fascinating. Well, here it comes to our favorite topic, empathy. Just to be on the same page, right? Merriam-Webster describes empathy as the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feeling, thoughts, and experience of another. So how have you experienced empathetic AI, and how does financial services change as AI evolves?
Sure. So I actually have a personal story that falls outside of financial services, but it speaks to exactly what you're describing there in defining empathy, which is the feelings, thoughts, and experiences of another. I brought my 13-year-old into the orthodontist for his first appointment to get his braces on. And the orthodontist actually had an AI solution where it would take a picture of my son's smile and then showcase what, after roughly 2 years, his smile will look like after the trials and tribulations of wearing braces for that time. And my son was so excited to see what his perfect smile will look like. And the AI failed miserably. It didn't look anything like my son or like a normal smile would look like. And rather than, really being sensitive and encouraging and supportive of what is a scary experience for a teenager to go get their braces for the first time, you would hope that the outcome would be exciting and worth all that effort. And it was a complete failure. So that is an example of a lack of empathy. I'll turn it now to financial services and one of our partners, and it's a startup called Upstart, based out of the Bay Area, publicly traded company now that leverages deep learning at the point of underwriting for personal loans. And Upstart is really using AI to improve the use of alternative data for underwriting and not rely simply on a credit score and a credit report before making a decision about an applicant and their ability to secure a personal loan. And the use of this alternative data and their deep learning explainable algorithms has resulted in a 27% higher approval rate for borrowers and at an average 16% lower APR. And so this is a real example of financial empowerment, financial enablement, understanding that consumers are more than what their credit score and their credit report says about them, and using alternative data to unlock access to financial resources that enable these individuals that are Upstart customers to continue along their financial journey. So that's a more relevant case study than perhaps orthodontia, but both examples of either empathy or lack thereof, as is the case with my son's experience.
Well, thank you for sharing your personal stories. I'll save mine until we see each other next time.
Okay.
Yeah, I came across actually the NVIDIA State of AI in Financial Services survey recently. It says that 37% of the C-suite viewed their own company AI capabilities as industry leading, but only 20% of developers have the same perception. So that surprised me. Any recommendation on how to bridge this big gap?
Yeah, I think it's all about communication, because the study, we dove a little bit further into that question, and we asked the C-suite, the developer community, and data scientists, as well as the IT leadership, what do you see as the biggest challenges to achieving AI goals in financial services? And these three different constituencies had a different rank order of their top 5 challenges, but they were all the same. They related to a lack of budget, too few data scientists, explainability is we already talked about, poor technology infrastructure. So the different teams organizationally are aligned on what the challenges are. I think the understanding of how significant those challenges are from a developer standpoint is quite different than the C-suite sees them. And I think the developer community would also be surprised to believe that the C-suite views a lack of budget for AI as a challenge, considering you would expect them to own the purse strings and be able to associate more budget with what is clearly an opportunity to gain competitive advantage in the marketplace. So plenty of opportunities for improved communication and understanding, as well as really aligning together around these top challenges for delivering AI in the context of financial services.
That makes sense to me. By the way, NVIDIA is really well known in the gaming world. So where else can we find NVIDIA?
Sure. I mean, we're talking about financial services today, but you would find NVIDIA in every industry around the world, from healthcare to manufacturing, retail to energy, telecommunications to automotive, as we talked about earlier. NVIDIA really is the AI platform of choice. We understand that it is more than just hardware, right? It has to be a full stack solution from the hardware through the platform systems and software up to the application layer. It has to work seamlessly. It has to enable what are your most valuable resources, the data scientists, the data engineers, the practitioners, to do their life's work. And really, it's all about building AI factories. Every company will have an internal AI center of excellence or an AI factory. That is the foundation of competition today. It is the foundation of competition for the foreseeable future. It will be critical to enabling competitive advantage in financial services. If you think about it, if a competitor is utilizing AI to support their call center, if it's using AI to improve their underwriting and risk management, if it's using AI to improve their asset management or their claims process, and you're not, there is a distinct disadvantage that you're putting your customers and your teams under. And to gain market share, it's all going to be related to the application and enablement of AI across the enterprise. So that's why you see NVIDIA everywhere when it comes to corporate innovation and strategic standpoint.
Wow, I've learned so much from this conversation already, Kevin. Financial services means data at scale to me. Right? How is NVIDIA powering the growth of financial service firms?
Sure. I mean, we just talked about AI factories and how that will become endemic to every industry. We are already seeing that within financial services and how they rely on NVIDIA to be present, not just from a full stack data center scale accelerated computing perspective, but to be available on-prem, to be available in the cloud, to be available from a hybrid perspective to support their business and their workloads wherever they choose to run them. But I think more importantly than the technology in terms of how we're powering the growth of financial services today, it all starts with people. And we ourselves have amazing people that are financial services specialists. They're engaged with the customers, with the data scientists, doing workshops on cutting edge AI, ML use cases, such as transformers for synthetic data generation or graph neural networks for improved identity verification in the context of fraud detection. And these solutions architects, account managers, dev techs, Kaggle grandmasters are all out there engaging the ecosystem in partnership with an amazing network of third parties, from CSPs to OEMs, ISVs, everybody that's necessary to come together to really enable financial services companies to execute on their AI and innovation strategies. That's where we find a home at the C-suite and empowering the future of AI and technological innovation in financial services.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for giving us a tour on a fascinating look at how AI is transforming the financial services industry in massive ways today. So here are my key takeaways from our conversations. NVIDIA has long been known for gaming technologies, right? It invented the graphics processing unit, that GPU, back in 1999, actually triggering the steep growth of the gaming market with superior computer graphics and intuitive AI. However, conversational AI is where GPU technology can make a significant difference. So when it comes to financial services, what I learned from you, two of the biggest growth areas of AI are consumer finance and capital markets. The impact of enterprise AI strategy and infrastructure is no longer limited to the retail banking, investment banking, asset management, insurance, and fintech. It has extended to many other use cases like fraud detection, algorithmic trading, recommender system whereby customers are given next step actions and compliance. You also talked about research and development or marketing earlier. So when AI understands the nuances of language, we will have taken the next big leap. Intuitive, empathetic AI is really upon us. Innovators like NVIDIA plays a major role in making that happen. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and stay hungry, stay bold, and stay grateful.